I learned that when a project of mine was successful, I would celebrate. And when a project of mine got rejected or wasn't successful, I'd celebrate that too. Because I thought, hey, any fool can celebrate success. That's easy. But it probably takes some real cojones, to say, it's a failure. Let's go celebrate.
And so you really celebrated those ones as well, Lee.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. I say to the kids, guys, sushi tonight. And they go, but Dad, your project just got canceled or they didn't pick it up or whatever it was. I said, yep, that's why we're going for sushi, because, you got to celebrate those things because that's part of life too.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition.
Welcome back to this episode of the Life in Transition podcast. I'm really excited to have our guest today is Lee Zlotoff. And Lee is a professional storyteller. He's an entrepreneur, he's a human, and he's also the creator of the very famous series MacGyver for television. Lee, most welcome to Life in Transition podcast.
Thank you, Art, for having me. I appreciate it.
So jumping right in, Lee, what would you consider to be the most meaningful transition that you have been through in your life, the most impactful transition?
I think I would say that it was my undergraduate education. I went to a small liberal arts school called St. John's College. That's not the university with the basketball team in Queens. I don't think I had a basketball team. And it actually has two campuses, one in Annapolis, Maryland, and one in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is where I happen to live now. And I say that was such a transformative experience for me because they have a very unusual program. You basically read and discuss the great books of the Western world for 4 years. There are a few elective here and there, but mostly everybody takes the same 4-year set program. You think, well, that's pretty rigid. But the purpose of this education is not to come out as a great book scholar because you read some of these books once or parts of them even. The purpose of the education was to teach you to speak, to teach you to listen, which is unfortunately becoming a lost art, to teach you to write, and to teach you to think for yourself. And I had, I was a very successful high school student, probably on my way to an Ivy League school, but all I knew how to do was basically give the teachers what they wanted on the test.
Right, so to regurgitate information.
Yeah, most of what we call higher education in this country is really just elevated primary education. You sit in a classroom, the professor professes. Your job is to absorb that information and then either on a test or a paper, as you said, regurgitate it, and then you promptly get a grade. And then you forget that information and you move on to the next thing. It doesn't,
right, which actually, unless it's very technical education, it's not that useful, actually.
It's as valuable as whatever thing you're going to do maybe afterwards, but that changes so fast now that, I would say the education that most of my contemporaries received is completely obsolete at this point.
Right.
Whereas I learned to be a lifelong learner. How do you look at something you don't know anything about, like a great book that is, you're told it's great, but you start reading it, you go, this is nigh unto incomprehensible. No, but somebody thinks this means something. So I've got to get in there and try and figure out what it means. And then on another level, it's what does it mean to me, not just what does it mean to everybody else. And so that really prepared me for not only life, but certainly my journey in the entertainment business. Because one of the things you learn at St. John's College is that asking the right question is even more important than maybe having the right answer. Because there's more than enough information out there now, as we all know.
Especially now. Holy cow. We have the whole world in our pocket, right?
Yeah, you push a button and you have more information than you possibly know what to do with. So it's not about the information, it's about how do you interpret, analyze, use that information. And so as I moved through the entertainment industry, I learned that asking the right question was maybe more valuable than having the right answer. I'll give you a simple, maybe
please.
easy example, but MacGyver. When I was developing MacGyver, the question was, what if we had an action-adventure hero who didn't use a gun? Where would that go? How would that work? Where would it take you? And that was fundamentally one of the major premises of MacGyver, which is, well, if he didn't have a gun, how was he going to, defeat the bad guys or overcome the situation if he wasn't going to be able to shoot back? That was a question that, for some bizarre reason, nobody in Hollywood had ever asked.
Right, yeah, because everybody has. I mean, all the heroes have guns and other things. I mean, MacGyver didn't just have a gun. He didn't have, most of the time he didn't have anything except what was in his environment, right? And that's why,
That's exactly
I
right.
love that show so much because of the ingenuity and the creativity of the main character, right?
And it was a dramatic hook of sorts because, James Bond, he always got all those toys before the start of the movie. This pen shoots bullets, or, this car can do 50 weird things. But if MacGyver went in with nothing, then it was, well, how is he going to succeed? And the answer was, well, he had an enormous knowledge base, obviously physics, chemistry, whatever. But he looked for the resources that he needed in the situation he was in. And invariably, they were there. And the fun of the show, or the hook, so to speak, is what is he going to find this week and what is he going to do with it?
Right.
Whereas I love action-adventure shows as much as everybody else, but basically it's, the bad guys are going to shoot at him and they're going to shoot back.
It's really different. And it was, I think what the magic of it felt like to me is that it's relatable. I mean, I love James Bond movies as well, but I'm never going to have an Aston Martin that flies, right? And I'm never going to have a watch that can be a rappelling cord, 500 feet down the side of a building. But, MacGyver inspires us to look around and say, okay, what's in my environment, and including myself, my knowledge, my centeredness, my state of mind, right? How creative can I be, and how can I figure my way out of this situation? And, my growing up, I didn't watch much TV. My parents didn't allow it, and we didn't even have a TV, I think, till 1981. But that was one show that I was allowed to watch. It was very interesting, and it was one that I enjoyed tremendously. And I think that's because of the relatability and the creativity of it.
It turned out to be one of those shows that the whole family more often than not watched together. So television usually divided the household. Oversimplistic maybe, but dad liked sports, mom liked, the soap operas and the dramas, the kids liked the comedies and the cartoons. And there they were, MacGyver, and dad said, no, I want to see this. I want to see what he's going to do. Mom said, well, he's cute and he doesn't use a gun. And the kid said, wait, you're watching this show together and we can watch too? We're there. So,
right. No, it was a really great show. I want to come back on the education piece for a minute because in between the last time we talked and now, I've had two more exposures to your university and thinking about it, both authored by David Brooks. One was in his book, The Second Mountain, where he talks specifically about your college and the value of this holistic type of education and opening the mind and not just regurgitating information. And the second one is an article in the Atlantic magazine recently. I get behind on them, so I'm not sure which month it is, but it was called How the Ivy League Broke America, talking about the shift from meritocracy, or from aristocracy in a sense, that all the same families went to the Ivy League schools and ran the governments and the big businesses in the country, to the good idea of meritocracy, except that they define meritocracy in one dimension. How good are you at taking a standardized test? Right? And then the results that we have today, that's a really, really messed up America by so many people getting the favors based on their ability to score high on a standardized test. And the backlash that's come from that. And we see that in our politics today. But I'm wondering if you, and he makes examples of schools like Chicago where he went, or St. John's, that work on educating the person, right? And work on growing, I'm going to say, the soul or the spirit, right? Not just academic or computer information, which is, as we said, is relatively available. I mean, how how different do you think society would be if there was more of this sort of classic educate your spirit and your soul and learn how to think and learn how to listen than just the focus on, I'm going to call it, the meritocracy, academic excellence in certain fields?
I think it comes down to looking at what's in front of you and trying to understand it. Okay. And we are handed explanations. God knows there's no limit of experts out there on virtually any subject. And so the idea of sort of having a general grasp of either the way things work or the way people think about how things work is not something we tend to do anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's led obviously into some amazing but confusing directions. A perfect example being, we all have these amazing little devices which allow us to communicate in any number of ways with virtually anyone around the world. And so you think, oh, well, look at this connectivity.
Right.
And yet as individuals, more and more people seem to feel isolated and alone rather than truly connected.
Absolutely.
So has it brought us together or has it somehow driven us apart? And, we don't have to belabor the concepts of disinformation or misinformation and somehow truth and information become sort of interchangeable.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And in my experience, I learned, again, going back to my career in Hollywood, how does this system really work? I know how it pretends to work, or I know how it seems to work, but is the appearance the same as the reality? Another simple example is it appears the sun goes around the earth, sunrise, sunset, high noon. But if you really think about it, the truth is that's not what's going on at all. In fact, the sun isn't moving, we're moving.
Right.
The earth is moving and at a ridiculous 1,000 miles an hour. And you go, how could we all be moving at 1,000 miles an hour? But the answer is we are, because the earth rotates once every 24 hours and that takes 1,000 miles an hour. That's how fast we're all moving. So there's the appearance of things and there's the reality.
And this classic education that you received is what allowed you to sort of question the surface of things, to ask the questions, to look at the next level behind the first appearance.
Yes, it appeared, for instance, in Hollywood that the executives or the studio heads or whoever it was you had to go to, they controlled the gate. They were the gatekeepers to fame and fortune. Okay. And you had to penetrate or somehow convince the gatekeepers to let you in. And in my experience, it turned out that wasn't really the way it worked at all. Okay. Most of the time.
But that's the way most people think of it, still probably today.
I totally get it. But after examining the workings of Hollywood, it became obvious to me that, those people were more frightened and confused and uncertain than I was.
Oh, wow.
Because their job, you would think, was to make things that made money. But the truth was, their job was really to try and keep their job, because the vast majority of things in Hollywood don't succeed. Hollywood is like baseball. It's a business of failure. And I'll explain what I mean by that. If you get up to bat in baseball and you get on base, let's say 3 out of every 10 times, you're a 300 hitter.
Yeah, which makes you pretty amazing.
Which makes you worth tens of millions of dollars
right.
a year to play baseball. Oh my God, this guy gets on base 3 out of every 10 times, but that means 7 out of 10 times you don't get on base.
That's right. Yeah.
So Hollywood is like that. Most projects do not succeed.
Right.
Some break even, and a few become hits.
Right.
So when a Hollywood executive says yes to a project, they are immediately at risk because the odds are the project's going to fail.
Right.
And they could conceivably be blamed for that failure and lose their job.
Right. So if they have too many failures, if they don't get on base at least 30% of the time, then they're out. And they're stressing about that every single time they decide to make a project.
Absolutely. So they backstop themselves, understandably, in as many ways they can. I got the hottest writer, the most talented director, the biggest name star. So if it doesn't work, it can't be my fault.
All right. Right. I did everything I was supposed to do, and the society wasn't ready for it or whatever.
So you understand then that they are trying to stay in that position long enough that something they're involved with succeeds, for which then they can take as much credit as humanly possible and either get a promotion or go work for another studio or whatever it is. And when you understood that, you said, oh, okay. So rather than my going to them and needing to plead with them or beg them, make my project, like my project, I went, no, I'm going to just go into that room and I'm basically going to say, I think I have something special. And if you see it, great. And if you don't, it's okay. The next person will see it, or the person after that. I don't need you. I just need somebody like you.
Right.
And it curiously changed the entire power dynamic. I wasn't arrogant, but I was supremely confident.
Right.
And when if you're confident and the person across to you is constantly afraid of whatever decision they make backfiring on them, it changes the whole relationship. And that was part of my being able to succeed in Hollywood, by just recognizing that, oh, they're more frightened than I am. So why don't I just lose that fear?
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Midlife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes, you've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do, but you still feel like something's missing, like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. Midlife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition, and we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community.
So that confidence, Lee, where did that come from? Did that come from the sort of the classic education and understanding that, or was there something else behind that?
That's a harder question to answer, I think. Certainly, the education gave me confidence because, as I said, learning how to speak, learning how to listen, learning how to think for oneself, and developing a kind of constant curiosity about everything were incredibly valuable tools. But there was also an experience I had. I've told this maybe a few times, but not many. When I was 5 years old, I had what can only be described as an epiphany. Okay? Rare that 5-year-olds have epiphanies. Certainly, it seemed rare to me, but I distinctly remember this experience, which I think ultimately formed the basis of who I am and the question you're really asking. So I had an older brother. We had friends. We would gather on the corner by my house, and we would walk up this big hill, and we would walk to school, kindergarten, along this exceedingly busy boulevard. You would never let a child do that. But in those days, it was like, go to school, you know?
We were free-range kids, right?
Crazy boulevard out there. You figure it out. Okay.
Yeah. Don't get hit by a car going 60 miles an hour.
Exactly. And so we were walking to school, and I'm watching these cars whizzing back and forth, and I asked myself, where are these people going? And then I said, oh, they must be going to work. And then I thought, okay, well, why are they going to work? And then I thought, well, I guess it's so they can make money. And then I thought, well, why do they want money? And then it occurred to me, well, they must want money so they can buy things like houses and cars. And I said, but why do they want the houses and cars? And then I said, it must make them feel a certain way. Oh, I own this big house, or I own this shiny new car. This
Right.
makes me feel good. And then I thought, but the houses and the cars, they don't have feelings in them. They're inanimate objects.
Right.
So the feeling must somehow already be inside of you.
Mm.
And these things are sort of triggering those feelings.
Right. Bringing the feeling out of you.
And then I thought, well, if the feeling's already inside of you, why don't you just tell yourself to have that feeling? And then you don't need a house or a car or maybe even a job. Now, granted, I'm 5 years old.
Right, right.
I can't pretend that I fully understood what I was thinking, but that has proved to be a kind of constant theme or armature in my life, which is it possible that the things you want are not really out there, that somehow they're already inside of you, and the process is not going out and chasing them and hoping you can capture them? And I'll give you an analogy for that. But maybe what you need to do is look inside and find a way to access what you want inside, and then it will appear, it will arrive, it will show up in your life. You say,
So when
well,
you say
that sounds
access
kind of
what you want, is it
Yeah.
like the physical thing or the feeling that we attribute to the physical thing?
I guess, for instance, I believed, and I say this to people who go into the entertainment industry, or for the most part, anything, I say, if you don't believe in your bones that you are going to succeed at this, maybe it's not the thing you should be doing. To quote Yoda, and I don't quote Yoda a lot, but there is do and there is do not. There is no try.
Right, right.
Okay? So if you don't, and I walked into Hollywood and I just believed in my gut, in my soul, in my bones, wherever you want to attribute it to, that I was going to succeed. I didn't know what the steps would be. I didn't know how I would get there. I just believed that I could do what they were doing.
Right.
Since I had become an expert learner, it's like, well, if other people are doing it, it must be doable. And if it's doable, somebody must be able to learn how to do it. If it's learnable, I can learn it too. And that became sort of my, glide path.
So this was the underlying foundation then of everything, which is why you said St. John's was so important, because that's what gave you that confidence to say, because of these steps, I can manage anything. If somebody else can do it, they learned how to do it. And since I'm a really good learner, which I learned at school, that I'm a really good learner, that I can really figure things out.
So working from those two things, namely, what I need is really already inside of me. When we were Neanderthals or Cro-Magnon or prehistoric men, choose your descriptor.
Right.
In order to survive, you had to go out and you had to hunt down an animal.
Yep.
And you had to kill it. And you had to skin it. You had to throw it over your shoulder and try and get back to the cave before a bigger, scarier animal either took it away from you or ate you both.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Yep.
We still seem to have that mindset. But the fact is, most of us don't live in a world like that anymore. I understand there are people in this world who struggle to survive on a daily basis. But there's 8.5, almost more, 8.7 billion people on the planet. Okay, the vast majority of them are not spending every day struggling just to put food in their mouths.
Right.
I'm sure there's a significant proportion they are, but many of us, certainly in the developed world, that's not the challenge. The challenge is, how do you experience your life so that you're not just existing, you're living? That you're not simply going through the motions, putting food in your face, getting married, having offspring, working in various jobs, but somehow it doesn't seem to fulfill you. It doesn't seem to, per our Constitution, satisfy the pursuit of happiness.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that between that sense that what you're really looking for may already be inside you, because it's really a feeling that you're after. And you, on some fundamental level, can control your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And then the tools that I got from my education, that seemed to be the pieces that kind of created what turned into my life and career. And many people, and I think Art and I, for those of you who obviously wouldn't know this, went for a long hike in New Mexico when he was out visiting. And we talked about a number of these subjects, not all of them. And one of the things that came up was I said, early on in my career in Hollywood, I made a distinction between what I do and who I am.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
And it's very easy in Hollywood to think my self-worth is based on whether Hollywood thinks I'm good and successful and hot, or whether Hollywood is rejecting me and thinks I'm cold. So there were years when I was incredibly hot. There were years when no one would return my calls. End of story. But I did not want to put my self-worth into the hands of people who, truth be told, didn't necessarily know what they wanted on a daily basis.
Sure.
They thought of me. So I said, you know what? This is what I do. Hollywood, the entertainment business, that's what I do. But who I am is my family, my community, the organizations that I belong to and cared about. My sense of self-worth, I did not give that to them. And that made not only a tremendous difference in how I moved through Hollywood, but it was a life-saving choice in the sense that, again, many of my Hollywood contemporaries are either bitter, angry, or burned out. And for good reason. I don't blame them for that, because it's a hard business. It's full of rejection. There was just a movie that came out called The Substance about a performer, and they decide, you're 50, you're too old. We're going to get somebody younger. And she is desperate to maintain her popularity, and so literally turns herself inside out in order to get that. And you go, oh, okay. But that's because her sense of self-worth came from what everybody else thought about her, not what she felt about herself.
Where did that come from, Lee? Because I think, I'll talk for myself personally. I was very much attached to my self-worth as my work and how successful I am at work. And I was very successful in my job and in my career, but it was unhealthy because I was very much attached to the good opinion of others, right? So how did you have that substance of knowing that your self-worth is not determined by somebody outside of you?
Well, I guess, again, it was that crazy epiphany when I was 5-year-old that somehow what I really needed and wanted was already there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have to get it from somebody else.
Right.
And being able to look at Hollywood and go, wait a minute, why am I going to hand over my self-worth to somebody else? Okay, because I could say, obviously, it's easy to do that. I mean, you're an actor. You are your own instrument. You get rejected. They're rejecting you.
Right.
And you're a writer. You go, well, I wrote this. You could say, well, they're rejecting my script. But most writers, they find
it's me. Yeah.
It's
my creativity. It's my life, my energy. Yeah.
It's a devastating experience. What do you mean? I worked all this time on this thing, and we don't like it. Go away. You just... as part of that, I learned that when a project of mine was successful, I would celebrate. And when a project of mine got rejected or wasn't successful, I'd celebrate that too. Because I thought, hey, any fool can celebrate success. That's easy. But it probably takes some real cojones, to say, it was a failure. Let's go celebrate.
And so you really celebrated those ones as well, Lee.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. I say to the kids, guys, sushi tonight. And they go, but Dad, your project just got canceled or they didn't pick it up or whatever it was. I said, yep, that's why we're going for sushi, because, you got to celebrate those things because that's part of life too.
It is. It definitely is. And did you see it? Did you did you celebrate it purely as, hey, I had a failure, it's a step, it's it's part of life, and we're going to celebrate it, or did you give yourself the, well, this is one rejection that's closer to the next positive, or did you see it as closer to a positive or as its own being a positive, that this is just part of life and let's celebrate life?
I think it was certainly more the latter, but that sense of I was satisfied with what I had done. I wasn't going to turn.
So it was celebrating a completion of doing good work on your own, whether somebody else accepted it or not.
I did what I was supposed to do, whether it worked for them or not. That's on them.
Right.
That's not on me. I never turned in a project where I went, this is garbage. Okay. So I have every expectation they're going. I never did that. I took a certain amount of pride or professional integrity in what I produced. And if I produced it and I thought it was good and they didn't, I went, well, that's their opinion.
Okay.
But I stand by what I did. And of course, curiously, in Hollywood, even the things that didn't get picked up or produced, they became money in the bank, because when I was hot, suddenly all of those projects became more interesting to people. And you went, do you have this? Well, as a matter of fact, oh yeah, we're going to make that because you're
it right now. Yeah.
You're a firecracker right now, and anything with your name on it is going to make us look good. And so you went, okay, so I really didn't lose anything by doing
that. But I think that's the key, and this is really great because I didn't get this in the first time we talked. The key is that because you did your work to the satisfaction level for yourself, then it's a celebration. Hey, I completed this thing and I put it out there. And I completed it not half-assed. I did it the way that I felt good. It's never perfect, but I did it in a way that I felt good about and put it out there. And if somebody doesn't see it right now, maybe somebody else will later, maybe not. But I still can celebrate me having done something that was my creativity and the courage to put it out there.
Absolutely. And no one, we know the successes of people in Hollywood, but you don't see all the times that they failed. Nobody goes to Hollywood and it's like instant success, one after the other, perfect laughs road, no bumps, no obstruction. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And anybody who tells you about their experience with Hollywood will tell you of the failures and the rejections. And you learn as much from your failures, if not more, than you do from your successes. So there's no real downside except the feeling like, oh, it didn't work. Okay, well, again, you control those feelings. So every life experiences pain and trauma. I find it hard to believe that there is a life with no pain, no trauma, no obstructions. Okay. Life is going to hand you some bad things, difficult situations, pain. The question is not that life hands you that. You're not a failure or less than because something bad has happened to you. The question is, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
How are you going to deal with it? How are you going to learn to incorporate it, learn from it, or live with it? I'm sure we know people who have lost husbands and wives, parents who have lost children. This is the most devastating of human experiences, to lose someone you love, particularly someone you have dedicated yourself to caring for.
Yeah.
Do you get over it? You don't get over it. You learn to live with it.
Yeah.
You learn to make it a part of your life experience rather than saying, I'm done, I can't live anymore. And some people have that reaction.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't do this anymore because that was so important to me. But
no, I was just saying, I've had 3 guests on this podcast that have lost children or spouses young, right? And it's amazing because the thing that I always think about too, and I even think I'm 30 years into marriage, right? And my wife I had this conversation, I don't know, a few months ago. She said, honey, you're going to have to outlive me because I can't live without you. So that's part of your job. And I said, all right. And a lot of people, I don't know if I want to get married because it's such a commitment and it could hurt so much if they leave me. I don't want to give myself completely to somebody. Well, guess what? You're going to leave them or they're going to leave you at some point, whether it's through death or something else. But would you rather have a life without the love as well? No, I'll take the pain. I know it's going to come at some point, but I'm loving the life that I get to have and the love I get to have now. So it's the full chorus. It's the low notes and the high notes together, but I would never choose, going back to what you said a minute ago, as far as like just going through the motions of life, right? That's also not some kind of life to live. And yes, of course, if you have the high notes, you're going to have the low notes. If we can, I was reading something recently that said, if I can take every moment and accept it as if I had chosen it, even if I haven't, but accept it as if I had chosen it, like you did with the failures at that time. Hey, I put it all out there and it didn't work, but okay, let's accept it as if I'd chosen it. Well, if I'd chosen it, what would we do? Let's go celebrate, right? Another project complete, whether it's sold or not, it's complete, and let's go celebrate. And I think that's the difference between going through the motions of life, as you said a minute ago, and being alive, right? And that's something that I felt so much. I mean, even on the outside, of people looking into my life before I made my big transition would have thought I was living fully. And in some cases I was, but there was a lot of it where I was going through the motions, doing what I thought I should be doing and not being fully alive. And in that sense, like, checking the boxes, but thinking that I'm just going through the motions instead of what is it that really is passionate? How can I feel the ups and the downs? How can I feel the wind on my face, the sun on my face, but also the rain and the cold wind? We talked about how cold it is this morning, both where I am and where you are, right? But to experience that and to be present with it where it's real, right? And that's been my journey in the last 5 years of this midlife transition and what I'm helping others with now through this podcast and through other programs that I have. Because wouldn't it be a shame, Lee? You were so lucky, I'll have to say, to have that epiphany a little bit when you're 5 years old. But wouldn't it be a shame, whether I'm 40 or 50 or 90, and I die without ever having lived?
It seems to me that the choice is obvious. In Hollywood, you obviously working with stars and people like that. And I discovered success doesn't necessarily guarantee happiness. It turns out the people who were happy before they were successful were happy after they were successful. And the people who were unhappy and miserable before they were successful were miserable after they were successful. And you think, how can you be miserable? You're on top of the world. You're paid millions of dollars and you're known everywhere you go and you have everything anyone who comes into this business was looking for.
Every material thing.
Yeah. And why are you unhappy? Well, this star got an award and I didn't, and they got this part and I didn't. And I go, what is wrong with you? Can't you see what you have as opposed to what you don't have? And the answer was they couldn't.
They couldn't, right.
And they were unhappy.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you are looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life. If you're facing challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching, or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets.
In your experience of being this up close and personal to you, is that those that were happy coming in stayed happy, and those that weren't happy stayed not happy, regardless of what the results were. So reinforcing again, might as well celebrate whether you have a failure or a success. And I'm going to add something to it. I think my hypothesis is that people that are unhappy coming in, if they have all the success that they dreamed of, may actually be less happy than they were before they had that success, because if they hadn't had that success yet, they'll tell themselves at least there's something to hope for, because when I have that success, if-then equation, right, then I will be happy. And once they have that success that they told themselves would make themselves happy, and they're not happy, oh shit, right? And that's where you can get into suicide and other things really quickly, because, hey, wait a minute, I've done everything I thought I should do. I've done everything that was going to make me happy, and I'm still not happy. Therefore, I have no agency left.
Happiness is a choice. And we have the ability to choose that or not, because once again, happiness is not a state of being so much as an emotion. And emotions, sort of by definition, they're like clouds. They shift, they change. Sometimes it's raining, sometimes there's no clouds.
But Lee, I want to, it sounds so trite, and I hear that all the time, but it sounds so trite. Happiness is a choice. How do I choose happiness? If you're sitting here talking to me, how do I wake up this morning, I feel like shit. How do I choose happiness?
That's a fair and a really good question. And I'm going to now go back to, if what you're looking for is inside you, how do you get to that?
Okay, great.
Because that became a challenge for me, all right? And I stumbled onto this, just like that 5-year-old epiphany. And I'll tell you, okay, I was what's called an episodic writer. I wrote episodic dramas, Remington Steele, Hill Street Blues, a number of other shows, okay. MacGyver, obviously. And so I was tasked with coming up with an enormous amount of creative material under relentless deadlines. I mean, once they turned on that production machine, God help you if that script was not ready, because you're paying 150 people hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars a day, and if they don't have anything to shoot, you got to pay them anyway.
And you're doing these at the time. These are episodes that came out every week.
Yes. I mean, it was like making a movie, give or take, once a week.
Wow. Yeah.
And I discovered that the best stuff came to me not when I was sitting at my fancy Selectric typewriter, or this was when dinosaurs ruled the earth and there were no computers. Okay. Aging myself, but the truth is the truth.
Yeah.
And I noticed that when I was trying to be creative at my typewriter, that wasn't when the best stuff came. The best stuff came when I was either driving or taking a shower. So when I was driving to and from the studio, or I was home taking a shower, to the point, Art, that when I got jammed up in my office and was getting incredibly stressed because nothing was flowing,
right,
I would jump in my car and drive around Hollywood and look for a gym or something where I could take a shower. You know, this had some unintended consequences, because people would say, is this guy screwing every starlet in Hollywood? Because he keeps disappearing for no apparent reason and coming back freshly showered. Like, what is that all about? Fortunately, in Hollywood, because my script kept coming in fast and good, they went, whatever he's doing.
Who cares? Right, whatever he's doing, keep doing it.
Let him keep doing it. Having been then to St. John's and going, wait a minute. Why is it that I'm having the best stuff when I'm driving and taking a shower, and not when I am supposed to be creative and working? And then I asked myself, okay, is there a way to duplicate that without having to drive or take a shower? And the answer was, the best stuff was not coming from my conscious mind. The best stuff was coming from some other part of me. What I now describe, as many other people do, as the subconscious mind, the unconscious mind. Some people call it the undermind. Some people call it the higher self. It's the part of you that goes 24/7 and has since, I believe, before you were born. Mm-hmm. Okay? You're only aware of it when your conscious mind falls asleep. Okay? And maybe you remember a dream. That's your subconscious.
Right, it's coming from subconscious.
Well, that's a little thing. My conscious is big and my subconscious is just this little thing. And that, it turned out, was the absolute mistake. That's the appearance. The reality is your subconscious is vast. It's enormous. Okay? So if your conscious mind, Art, is your, let's say, your studio that you're sitting in right now.
Right.
Your subconscious mind is the state of Tennessee.
Right.
Okay,
right.
That's a more realistic comparison.
Right.
Everything you've ever experienced, crazy as it sounds, is still contained inside of you. And so when I was trying to be creative, when you're driving or taking a shower, your conscious mind has to focus on what it's doing.
Yeah, it's preoccupied. Yeah.
It has to be. I mean, even though driving is second nature, you've got to pay attention to how fast you're going, when do I need to turn, who's in front of me, who's behind me, who's on my left, who's on my, moment to moment. You got to be there or you're going to drive into a tree.
Right.
Okay?
Or let someone else drive into you. Yep.
Same thing in the shower. You don't get quote unquote creative with the way you shower. You shower the same way every time. But you don't want to slip and fall. You don't want water up your nose. You don't want soap in your eyes. You have to really kind of pay attention. That's when it turns out your subconscious could say, hey, Art, you know that thing you've been struggling with? What about this? What if you tried this? It gets to come out then and talk to you.
Right.
And you're like, where is this go? Why are these great? I know people who put whiteboards in their showers because, I'm going to write it down. I want to lose it. Okay. Or recorders in their cars. And I went, wait, something's happening here. Can I reproduce that? And it turns out I could reproduce it. I put a big whiteboard in my office and I put a workbench. I had a desk with the computer, but whiteboard, workbench. And when I was tasked with coming up with a new episode, let's say,
Right.
instead of, boy, what am I going to write? What am I going to write? I just went right on the board. I need some great ideas for an episode. And then don't think about it. And I went to that workbench, and crazy as this sounds, I built models. I built models out of paper, built the Empire State Building out of paper, built the Taj Mahal out of paper. Art, I built every paper model kit that I could get my hands on. I built the Vatican. I built the Statue of Liberty. I built a Brooklyn Bridge. No one, trust me, Art, needs a Brooklyn Bridge made out of paper. But I wasn't working on the models because I needed the models.
Right.
They ended up with my kids who had a blast trashing them entirely.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
What the models did was the same thing as driving or taking a shower. It kept my conscious mind out of that process and let my subconscious mind work on whatever it was I needed. Okay. And I'm doing what amounts to almost idiot work. Go glue tab B into tab A 50 times,
Right.
Use an X-Acto knife and cut out this shape very carefully. And I mean, nonsense work.
Right.
But then after having written the question on the board and worked on the model for half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, I went back to the board and I said to my subconscious, what do you got? And then I simply started writing anything. I could write the Star Spangled Banner. I could write what I wanted for lunch. I could write gibberish. It didn't matter. Within 30 seconds of physically writing on that whiteboard, boom, the ideas would just flow out of me. And sometimes I couldn't write fast enough. I mean, it's like I'm trying to capture them all. No, wait. Hold on, say that again.
Right.
And I realized that the best stuff was there for the asking. All I had to do was learn how to communicate and develop a dialogue, as it were, with my subconscious. Okay.
Right.
Years go by. A friend of mine is trying to launch an internet company. This is before there were manuals and books about how to do it. And he came to me and he said, I'm struggling. I got problems every day. And I said, I use this process. I just assumed it was me or maybe just for creative writing. I said, try it. Write down what the problem is. Okay. Describe it in as best you can. And then go do something else. He ended up coming in, writing his problems on a yellow pad, not a whiteboard. And then he'd get on his bike and he'd ride up and down the Venice boardwalk for an hour. And then he'd come back and lo and behold, he got the answers he needed. And he came to me after about a year and a half and he said, you're a genius. And I said, let's control ourselves. He said, no, you don't understand. This is not a creative writing thing. This is a problem solving process that you've uncovered. Because it turns out everybody's brain more or less works this way. You have to adapt it for exactly what you're trying to do. But he said, you saved my company. You built this company. You saved my company on more occasions because I could find a solution to the problems that I needed. And it turned out they were all inside me. He said, you got to put it out there. Of course, I said, please, who's going to listen to a TV writer? Come on. I mean, it's like, no, you really got to put it out there. So eventually I found people who were academics. I wanted to make sure there was some science behind it in the business of creativity. And I found such a person who became the co-author of the book that I wrote, the nonfiction book called The MacGyver Secret, Connect to Your Inner MacGyver and Solve Anything.
Mm.
So, long-winded way of saying, if the answers are inside you, you can use something as simple as the MacGyver Secret, which involves nothing more than a pen and a piece of paper. That's
right.
it.
And so, and a little bit of time and
That's
distraction.
it.
Yeah.
And you can get the answers you're looking for, whether they're creative answers, whether they're technical answers, whether they're personal answers. Personal questions, sometimes you have to ask more than once. But that's because part of the job of your subconscious is to keep your more painful experiences away from you.
Right. Yeah.
If everything that was painful
came up all at once,
it was in the forefront of your mind, you'd be comatose. You would unable to function. So it says, I keep this stuff away from you so you can go on living your life. And then when you say, yeah, but why can't I have the kind of relationship I want? Why am I constantly struggling with my weight? Why can't I find the job that fulfills me? Those answers are in there. Okay. You can have those answers. You may have to ask more than once, but I guarantee you, at the point that your subconscious said, oh, so we're going to look past the pain and we're going to get down to the nitty gritty here, it will give you those answers too. It has for me. That's why I wrote the book.
Oh, that's amazing. And I want to change one thing or add one thing. You said, why can't I have this or why can't I have that? Maybe a better one is, how can I? Right? And so you're going in the direction you want to go to. But coming back to the question, like I started with the question of, how do I choose happiness? I wake up in the morning, I feel like shit, I'm depressed, whatever. How do I choose happiness? And I think when I think about this, a sense of agency also really, for me, makes me feel happy. Right? If I, like, hopelessness, depression comes from, like, I have no sense of agency. I don't feel like there's anything I can do. Life is overwhelming. I'm ticking the boxes, So just that, I mean, I don't know if you intended it that way, but I'm taking it that way, that this is one of the ways to choose happiness. Because if I know that I have this knowledge, this, connection to my higher self, subconscious, God, whatever you want to call it, if I can tap into that, if I can communicate it into something that really knows and can give me direction, that's agency. And agency always, taking some action always makes me feel better, right? I love that statement, the motion creates the emotion. It's not the other way around, right? It's not when I feel good, I'm going to go run. I'm going to go run, and then I feel good, right? The motion creates the emotion. So I think that's one answer. Or is there anything else that you would add as far as how to choose happiness? If it is inside us, that's a way to tap into it. Is there anything else you would add on how to choose happiness?
I think your suggestions are all good ones, because they're all the kinds of what we call incubation activities, physical exercise, but it has to do with, don't get caught in the hamster wheel of your conscious thoughts, because it turns out there are phenomenal resources inside of all of us if we just knew how to tap into them. And if you stop and say, I can't put in a light bulb, but I can MacGyver myself. Okay, I can start with what seems like nothing. This day promises nothing. And you go, yeah, but you have these enormous resources inside of you, and there may be even resources outside of you, a la MacGyver, that you haven't really looked at carefully. And between those two, there's probably a way to take a step forward. So question one is, where do you want to be? Where do you want to end up? Have you taken a step today that's going to get you there? You may not see all the steps at this moment, but taking a step has got to get you closer than taking no step.
Absolutely. And I want to add something here too, that the first step that you take may not be one you want to take, right? I mean, to be who we want to be, sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do, right? When I first started training for ultra endurance races, I wasn't crazy about getting up at 3:30 in the morning to go run in the 85% humidity and 79 degrees in Tennessee summertime, right? But I had a connection to, like, if I want to do that, if I want to be an Ironman, then this is part of the price. And then after a while, here's the trick for me, I really learned to enjoy it. I learned to enjoy the process as well, but it doesn't start there. Sometimes I have to I have to do the uncomfortable thing that is the first step toward driving me toward where I want to go. Comfort is overrated, and embracing our discomfort is also something that, overcoming that is also something that makes us happy as well.
One of the examples from my life is I would meet with my agent or agents, producers, I need a job. I want to get a job, okay? And sometimes it just wasn't working. Things just weren't clicked. For whatever reason, they weren't interested. I was cold in the business.
All right.
And I went, okay, I'm going to stop going to meetings. I'm going to stop calling people. I'm just going to sit down and start writing something that I want to write. Maybe it'll sell, maybe it won't, but I got to start that creative process right here, right now. I have me. Okay.
Right.
They don't want me, but I want me, and I have me. So let's work with what I have. Let's do it. And damn it, Art, if within a week or 2 weeks of doing that, the phone doesn't ring. And my agent says, hey, there's 3 producers who want to meet you. And I go, what? And he goes, yeah, I don't know why they read, I don't know, your script, an old script of yours is making the rounds. The job showed up.
Right.
Or I would go in and pitch the thing I was writing, and they go, oh, we would pay you to write that. I didn't even tell them that I'd started writing it,
Right.
But they went, well, I've been kicking around this one idea. Ooh, I like that idea. So,
Right.
And I did that on more than one occasion. Now, I can't pretend to tell you how the physics or the metaphysics of that work. I don't honestly know. But it worked, Art.
Right.
Every single time it worked. And this culminated ultimately. I'm in Hollywood. I have a business manager. I have a lawyer. I have an agent, all these people. And my business manager calls me in and says, Lee, I just wanted you to know what your kind of yearly nut is.
Your expenses.
My expenses. What it's going to cost you to, you got a house, you got cars, you got a house, you got a nanny, you got 4 kids, you got another stuff. Okay. And he shows me the number, and I'm like, holy moly. That's a big number. How am I supposed to make that year in and year out? I mean, I was like,
Start freaking out.
I got to tell you, this is what it is. You got to know this. I went home and I was like a mess. I'm thinking, man, I don't know how to do this. And then all of the experiences that I just described to you, I went, wait a minute. My job is not to make money. My job is to come up with good stories. And if I can come up with 3 or 4 good stories a year, which I like to do and know how to do.
Anyway, right. You would do even if you weren't getting paid for.
The money's going to take care of itself. He has to worry about the money. I don't have to worry about the money. That's not my job. My job is to look for those stories. And I'll tell you, Art, it saved my life because it was just a change in perspective. The same dollars had to end up getting made, but I was coming at it from an entirely different place, which is don't think about the money. That is going to take you down a dark, scary tunnel, and you're never going to succeed. Think about the stories. That's what you do. That's your skill.
Yeah, that's your gift. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Do what you do, and the rest will take care of itself. And 9 times out of 10, I beat that yearly nut. Okay, he went, we're doing greatly. The nut, I say, fine, whatever. You're happy, I'm happy, great. Bills get paid, the kids go to college, it's all good. Okay, but it started with changing that perspective.
Right. So you're not about making money per se. You're about doing your job, whatever that job is for you. Right. I like I'm looking over there, Artist Way. Right. She talks about in there. She says, God's gift to us is the creativity he gives us, or it gives us, whatever God is, right? And our gift to God, which is also our gift to society, is what we do with that creativity, right? So what is our job? And then to lean into that job and do it well and do it for ourselves, and then, trust and work and connect, and that the money's also taken care of.
And as part of that, I would say, because you're probably going to ask this question, because people like you always ask this question. Like, what's the one thing, if you had to say to somebody, what's the one thing you would, and I would say,
Well, so you saved me from asking that question, Lee. Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Be fearless. Be fearless. Because more often than not, when you're prepared to face those fears, number one, they turn out not to be as bad as you thought they were. And number two, more often than not, you overcome them and you succeed.
So can I challenge that a little bit? You said be fearless.
Yeah.
And I'm going to translate it and see if this makes sense to you or not. So being fearless, I think, wait a minute, I have fear, so I can't be fearless, but I can face my fears. I can go toward my fears. I can go through my fears. I don't have to stop because I have the fear. Is that what you're meaning?
Okay, I'll say it another way.
Okay.
Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing it even though you're afraid.
That's right. That's right.
So I went, okay, nobody seems to want to hire me now. Where is the next job going to come from? Write something that you might be afraid to write.
Ooh, there we go.
Take on a challenge. What's the dragon that you know? Because guess what? Dragons, when you go after them, they usually sit on pots of gold. They're sitting on massive treasures.
That's right.
They breathe fire. Granted, you gotta wear your fire suit when you're going after a dragon. But they sleep on piles of gold. And so you go, what's the dragon that I've been afraid to face?
Yeah, what's scaring me right now? What am I afraid of? And then I'm going to head in that direction.
Go in that direction and see what happens. Because
you're speaking to me right now, Lee. I don't know, man. I think that's great. I mean, I think that's really great to go toward what scares us. I put it in little analogies like skiing. Whenever I learned to ski some new double black diamond, at the top of the hill, it's much more scary than even if I wreck on the way down. Even if the worst case happens on the way down, it's less scary than standing up there thinking about it. So no, it makes a lot of sense to go toward what scares us. So that's the one piece you would leave with our guests. One thing, if something scares you, go toward it instead of away from it.
Because even in the act of doing that, the fear diminishes, your confidence increases, and the chances of success quintuple.
Right. And if you don't know where to start, then write it on the whiteboard and go for a bike ride and come back, or build them up and come back and keep writing and start writing, even if you don't have the answer, and let the answer come up.
Don't wait for the answer to come up. Just start writing.
Right. Yeah, no, I've had a lot of good experiences with that too. I thought that was one of my superpowers, but it seems like maybe it's universal. So no, hey, this is brilliantly. I really appreciate it. Where can you mentioned a book and you mentioned some other things? Where can people find out more about you, Lee?
Sure. We have a website called MacGyver.com, MacGyver.com. And there's not only the MacGyver Secret Book is there, but we have a MacGyver Foundation. We do philanthropic projects through that. There's a number we're working on right now. There's a MacGyver fiction series. We just came out right before the holidays with the second book of the MacGyver fiction series. Cool. We're turning MacGyver into a musical. I mean, there's again, I love what I do. And people say, are you retired? And I go, why would I retire? I'm a storyteller. I can tell stories until the breath is gone from me, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to keep telling good stories, and the rest takes care of itself. And the dragons, more often than not, bow down and hand me their treasure. So
there you go. There you go. And that's what it is, like to keep doing what it is that's our work to do. And work isn't like, it's not the drudgery, but what's our capital work? What's our creativity? What are we put here for? And we keep doing that as long as we can. And that's what brings the juice and brings the life. And therefore the happiness that's not really pursued, but ensues when we're doing our work and facing our fears.
I think.
So that's awesome. Well, we'll post all of that in our show notes, Lee, but I really appreciate you taking the time. And a couple of us will get this to be with me again. Thanks so much. It's just very enlightening and very useful and very interesting.
I'm glad you thought it was worthwhile, Art. I appreciate the opportunity.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.